Hey everybody, welcome to A Time to Chill. This is Drew. We got a special guest in the office today. You know what I'm saying? We're going to be talking about the riots and everything that went on downtown. I wanted to bring some people in to get their perspective on what happened. So if you're tuning in and you were down there and you want to come in and talk about your personal experience, we would love to have you. But right now it's not about you. It is about
My name is Monique Rios, and I'm 25, live here in Madison, and I was there Saturday night and during the day for the protest and the riots.
okay, Monique. So, a little bit about yourself. You know what I'm saying? What brought you downtown? What was your interest in the case and and all that?
I'd have to say what brought me downtown in the first place, because originally I went to the first protest that happened, the peaceful one, obviously, that took place originally. My boyfriend and I woke up a little bit later than I had planned on, and I saw on Facebook that the protest was still going on, so we drove downtown and were able to find the protest when they were down on Willie Street. I was able to get in on one of the banners actually, and was able to hold the Black Lives Matter banner as we walked it from Willie Street all the way back up to the Capitol steps.
Oh, so you held the Black Lives Matter banner?
Yeah, and that's one thing I really did enjoy. I do have some pictures and whatnot of myself. Unfortunately, I'm 5'2", so you can't really see me that well, and with the face mask and everything on that I had. But it's still, I'm just glad that I was able to be there and be an important part during it all.
Okay, so just kind of walk us through the events.
Okay.
What happened?
Well, what originally happened is, like I said, we were down at the original protest down that walked from Willie Street up to the Capitol. We weren't there for the walk from the Capitol down to Willie Street. They when we met up with them, they were at the house on Willie Street that Tony Robinson had been murdered at. And personally, myself, when the whole Tony Robinson incident had happened, I was living down in Madison at that time as well, because I'm not originally from here. But I've been living in Madison on and off for the past 5 to 7 years or so.
And you want to tell us where you're from, real quick?
My hometown originally is Oxford, Wisconsin. It's about an hour north of Madison. It's a very small town, about 500-600 people. So not many people know it.
Okay.
But when the Tony Robinson case was going on, I felt, I guess you would say close to it without having known anybody related to it personally, because at the time I think I was 19, 20 years old, so more or less around and very close to the same age as Tony Robinson himself. So I felt, close to it. Even though I'm only half Latino, I still, understood the pain that could come from that situation and the worry of what if that had been me and not him.
Okay. So you mentioned you're half Latino.
Yeah, my father, we don't know exactly what he is. I don't have contact with him anymore, but he's originally from Texas, so I know for the most part he's Mexican, but growing up, my grandma on his side would tell me I was, Mexican, Mayan, Aztec, and pretty much everything else that I could think of from memories. So I don't know exactly what I am on his side, but on my mother's side, I know I'm German, French, Canadian, and she took a DNA test not too long ago and found out we're like 1% Switzerland.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just a weird combination of everything, I guess you would say.
Okay. All right, so yeah, continue on.
But yeah, so I remember being down at the Tony Robinson protest and marching around the Capitol with them when they were down there when he was murdered by the police officer. I guess I would say I didn't take nearly as much of a active role as I would say as I did in this protest, but having participated in that, I guess, is what pushed me towards wanting to go and be a part of this protest as well, because I felt, this is just, another person who, even though they weren't from our city or our state, is still just as equally as important as, the Tony Robinson case. So when we met up with them, like I said, we marched back up to the Capitol. We were there for a while. Then my boyfriend and myself decided to go back to our house. We don't live downtown. We live like 10 minutes from downtown. So we drove home. We're making a pizza. And I just remember looking on Facebook and seeing some of the I guess you'd say like the pictures of, Goodman starting to get looted and some pictures of the riot police.
The Goodman Community Center?
No, the Goodman's Jewelry.
Oh, Goodman's, okay.
Yeah, because that's the first place that was looted. And I think on the first day, that was like the first place that was ever really touched. Until later on in the evening, then I think other places ended up getting robbed and whatnot. Excuse me. But when we were at home, the pizza was more or less just getting done. I remember seeing these pictures and, eating a slice or two and then telling my boyfriend, I want to go back down there. I want to see what's going on. Because I would rather myself have a first-hand experience and know what's actually going on rather than having to first off see it through the media. Because I've noticed a lot throughout all of this that's gone on in the past couple days. The media is portraying a completely different perspective and story than what is actually going on in person there. And that's even just from my personal experience from being there on Saturday, as well as Sunday and yesterday watching live streams that are there of people rather than what the media is showing. So I remember we got downtown and we parked in that parking lot that is a public parking lot right by Hopcat, if anybody knows where that is.
Oh, Hopcat, that's the place that has like all the different beers. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like the ridiculous amount of beers. And they have, they don't think they're called this anymore, but they used to be called crack fries. I don't know if you've ever had them, but they're delicious.
Never had crack fries. I've never
they're pretty much just like, yeah. They're, I believe they're just like a black peppered crackle or something. To like fries, just the way that they're seasoned. I think they had to change the name because people were starting to, I guess you would say, insinuate about the things of where it actually came from.
Oh man, that's so if the fries were so good, people were thinking that they had crack in them for real.
I don't know exactly if that was the case, but I know from the first time I tried them a couple of years ago to the last time I was there, probably about a year ago, that the name has changed and they're no longer crack fries. Now I think they're like black peppered fries or something.
Okay, for sure. Okay, so let's not get too far off
yeah.
topic now. Okay, so let's go back to.
We don't need to talk too much about food, but
okay, so
then we parked the car, and as you know, Hopcat, that area right there is literally directly on State Street. So I remember, for the most part, we walked from the car and hopped on State Street, and at this point, the police obviously had the Goodman's area of State Street blocked off. Because, and I understand why, there was crime going on. I do understand why they took those stands. And at that time, I was pretty close to being by the front, and they had more or less had that block held off, I would say. And a lot of us were just standing there, just standing there, just not even doing anything. There was no objects being thrown at the police officers, nothing. And then they began to slowly advance on us, coming down towards State Street.
The police?
Yes, in a full line of police officers with riot gear.
So like the shields and everything.
I don't know. I don't think at that time that they had shields. They did have shields later on in the evening, but at that time they still had the entire, bulletproof vest. They had the shin guards on. They had batons. They had pepper spray. They had tear gas canisters, obviously loaded up and ready. And as they began to slowly push down on State Street to where the line of people were, which is where I was one of the handful of people, I would say, who was at the very, very front. Because, there was a decent amount of crowd, but I would say it was less than 50 people that were there. Really? And that also includes people that were
like 50 protesters?
Well, I mean, just 50 people in general. The 50 people were also, there were people that were also just sitting at, bars drinking. Mm-hmm. People that were just on the sidewalk, they were doing their, whatever they were doing on Saturday.
Oh, who just weren't part of the protest, they just happened to be downtown anyway.
Yeah, so just I would say like the number of people in that area was less than 50. It wasn't it wasn't a big group of people. It wasn't anything that, in my opinion, compared to how the numbers ended up turning out for the original protest, which was around 2,000 or 3,000 people.
Oh wow, it was that many?
It was a ridiculous amount of people. It was incredible, I would have to say. And so, even though there was a very small number of people, yes, there obviously were less cops in there than there were people, but it wasn't something that, in my opinion, I would have taken as, this is a threatening situation. But then they continued to push down State Street, and as they got closer to the front of the people that were at the front of the crowd, like myself, I do remember There's this one guy, I don't know who he was personally or anything like that, but I remember as they were getting closer, like him and myself were up there, and at times, we're chanting, Black Lives Matter, chanting hands up, don't shoot, with our hands up in the air and everything else. And, more or less just chanting the normal things that you would hear at a Black Lives Matter protest.
Yeah.
And, at the time, if at all anything anybody had in their hands was either their phone or a bottle of water. It wasn't like, anybody was having threatening weapons or anything like that to cause them fear or concern.
Okay.
And as they got closer to us, I would say they were within 10 to 5 feet of us, and then they began pepper spraying.
But so let me let's back it up now. So you're saying that everybody in the crowd, like nobody had any weapons, like
Nope.
you said, people had bottles of water or whatever.
Yeah.
So the police took it upon themselves to make a non-threatening situation worse, is what you're telling us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's how it was. It was a situation of, yes, it might have been a group of people that might have been in a little bit more of numbers than they were, but there was nobody throwing anything at them. There was nothing that was threatening other than the possibility of us yelling, "What the hell are you doing here? We're not doing anything wrong."
Yes, and that's definitely not a reason to pepper spray.
Yeah,
someone.
I mean, the First Amendment, we can say whatever we want, and there's no reason we should have to be worried about having harm done to ourselves for saying something. And I remember pretty distinctively the first time that they pepper sprayed, I was pretty lucky. I had this, it was just a cheap mask that I bought at Pick and Save one day for like a couple bucks. Mm-hmm. So it was just, basic little cloth black mask that I had on my face, and I had these sunglasses on. And I was pretty lucky that the first time that they pepper sprayed me, I had both those things on my face. So I didn't get anything in my eyes at that time. You get a little bit on the parts of your face, like here. And I was wearing a t-shirt similar to this. So I remember getting a lot on my arms and stuff, because my arms were still burning days later. But when they first pepper sprayed, I didn't have to, like I did at other times, have to turn away and run back because of the pain and the anguish of it all. Mm-hmm. So when it first happened, when they first pepper sprayed, after it happened, I'm still standing there. It's a little hard to breathe through the mask because the pepper spray is burning your throat. But I remember, yelling like, "What the fuck? Like, we're not doing anything. We're just standing here. We're peaceful. We're not harming you. We're not threatening you." And yes, I know myself personally, I did throw out quite a different amount of profanities.
Whether it's understandable, being in that situation.
Yeah, I mean,
especially isn't a crime.
Yeah, especially when having been, in my opinion, being pepper sprayed by a police officer is being assaulted by them.
Yes.
Because it's them using a form of, I guess you'd say, authoritative, oppression upon you.
I think they would call that excessive force.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
That's more of the words I was looking for. So I remember then, like I said, after the first time that they pepper sprayed me, still being able to look at them and, be like, what the hell's happening? What's going on? And they just continued pushing further down State Street, pushing us towards the very end, like where Library Mall is. Mm-hmm. And, after the first time, then I ended up having to take my mask off because the pepper spray was soaked into it. So I was just breathing it in, and it was making my mouth and my throat hurt. So I took that off, and I had to take my sunglasses off because all you could just see was the splatter of pepper spray up against the lenses, and it was hard to look out of them. And then, at that point, I'm just angry and yelling at them along with many other people who still at times were even continuing to chant, hands up, don't shoot, hands up, don't shoot, or, fuck the police, whatever it may have been that was coming out, at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I just remember they kept continuously pushing us further and further and further down State Street, continuously pepper spraying anybody who got within 10 to 5 feet of them. And I can understand, doing it if, say, you're within arm's length of somebody, of the police officer, if you're within close proximity to cause harm, but nobody was at that point. So as they continued pushing us further and further down, obviously, I don't know, I knew a couple people that were down there. I'm not going to obviously say any names of anybody that I knew, and I'm not going to go too much into detail, but after being pepper sprayed probably 4+ times at this point, I know myself personally, and I can't imagine how many others had been as well, that I remember seeing or, experiencing and being around, people began picking up or throwing their water bottles at the police officers. And I remember seeing rocks start coming in and being thrown at the police officers, just in retaliation for the anguish that they're, putting upon us.
And at this point, so at this point in time, I know we talked about the jewelry store. At this point, was other buildings getting vandalized at this point?
No, at this point, there were no other buildings that had been vandalized. That didn't come until after they started tear gassing us, and that was a little bit further on. Because after people began throwing rocks and whatnot, they began pushing us harder and harder. I remember we were down in the area around like State Street Broads, very, very far down State Street.
Yeah.
And they kept pushing us further and further back. And we ended up, I remember being down in the Library Mall area. And I remember there was a pretty, I'd say, 20, 30 feet distance between the line and the people because everybody was backing up far enough because nobody wanted to be pepper sprayed anymore.
Right, understandable.
Mm-hmm. And so at that point, then they ended up shooting off what looked like a tear gas canister, but I know it wasn't because the smoke around the area, I don't remember my eyes burning or anything like that. But it was like a paint canister. It shot out like red, like a red cloud of dust or whatever, which was just very odd. And I remember at this time, my boyfriend said, and there might have been other people who said it before him to, give everybody the idea, to run through the alley that is in between like the church area and the bookstore there, run around the alley there and then back around to get on Lake Street to get back by State Street. I believe that at the time there was still like possibly, a few stragglers that were maybe at Library Mall still, but a good chunk of the people, ran around the corner and then back on the Lake Street right by State Street. And I remember there were a couple of squad cars that were there parked, and people had grabbed more rocks and whatnot in the alleyway and were throwing them at the police cars. I don't remember seeing any damage, like there was no windows broken in the police cars, but maybe like a dent or two or scratch that may have happened.
Yeah, so at this point, let me recap for you, you know what I'm saying? And, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but you're saying the situation became worse when the police made a non-aggressive situation aggressive. So at that point, that's when people started throwing rocks in the car and started doing all this carrying on and all that.
Yeah, everything in my personal opinion and experience from being there, everything was calm, except for, yes, we were yelling, outraged by even just them showing up in such full riot gear and excessive amounts of, protection when nothing was happening. They showed up with all of that, and nothing was happening until people had been pepper sprayed. Like it wasn't the first time that I was pepper sprayed that rocks started flying. It was after the third or fourth time that I had been pepper sprayed that I started seeing rocks and other water bottles or whatnot being thrown at them. There was no aggression or anger coming from the group of people that were there until they put out that excessive force to cause it.
So the police started the initial situation by killing an innocent, or I guess a man who did not deserve to die.
Absolutely.
And then escalating situations further at the protest to where they can become more violent.
Absolutely, and that's how more or less the entire night ended up playing out throughout my whole experience there. So then after we were around the corner on Lake Street by State Street, by that 7-Eleven right there. There were still, cops in a line somewhat this way down towards Library Mall, and then we decided to run on the other side of them on State Street, and they ended up turning back around. And, everybody's just in anger and, pissed off and upset about what's going on. And, we slowly start backing up because they're still trying to pepper spray anybody that's within even a remotely close distance to them. And, we're all backing up. Personally, myself, my boyfriend was in the entire time trying to pull me back from the front lines because he didn't want anything to happen to me, which I understand. But, myself, I think it's mostly my Latino side. I have a very short temper sometimes you piss me off, I'm going to speak my mind and address the situations I see at hand.
Yeah, I heard you guys can cut a motherfucker too.
Yeah. But so, once we were on the backside of them, you know, some of them had turned facing us, and the next thing I know, we were a little bit further back, you know, probably still 20, 30 feet from them. They shot off the first tear gas canister. And, you know, this is when, you know, none of us are close to him. Yeah, a couple rocks might have been flying in, but you have full protective gear on. At the very most, you might get a little bruise, if that, if they were the police. So I remember when the first tear gas canister was set off, once it hit the ground and then bounced a couple times, it landed maybe from me like 5-10 feet away. So, having played soccer before, my first instinct was to run up and kick it back towards them, which I did. I did run up and I kicked it back in their general direction. But I remember after that happening, instantly just my whole throat and mouth was just on fire. I could barely breathe. And that was having been in a very, very small cloud of tear gas for less than 5 seconds. And my eyes were just beyond extreme anguish from not only the pepper spray, which after being pepper sprayed, you know, the first couple times, there were people there that I was dousing with water, milk and magnesia, water and baking soda, pretty much everything that you could do to help relieve pain.
Where were people getting all these things? Did they just have them on them?
No, I believe people were going down to Walgreens and getting
supplies.
things.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
because I mean, we had all heard about all the protests and everything going on in Minneapolis, so I think everybody just kind of somewhat in the back of their mind knew some of the things that you might need to use to help relieve or help other people when those situations occurred to them.
Absolutely.
Which that's one thing I will say, I do give all the props to anybody who was there just to purely help out other people. But after the first tear gas that happened, then I kicked it back. My boyfriend, you know, I was obviously up at the very, very front, that probably one of the 2 people that was up there. He ran up to me and he was trying to grab me and telling me, you know, come on, we got to get back. We got to fall back. We got to move back. And, you know, as I'm trying to go, I'm trying to tell him, like, you know, I can't breathe myself personally, which I hate to say it is very coincidental with the situation that started everything with George Floyd not being able to breathe himself. And I couldn't see, and, you know, I can't breathe, so I'm trying to run, which makes it very, very difficult. So he was at that point almost trying to carry me or, you know, drag me to get me further back because he didn't want any more things to happen to me personally. I remember we got back, you know, where Potbelly is, right on State Street, how there's that little hill area that kind of goes up towards Langdon Street.
Oh, yeah. Like off to the, it's like to the left.
Yeah, where there's like those weird like rock formation things or whatever. It was literally right there on that side of the street. I finally got pulled down and I told him, like, I can't move anymore, like I have to sit down. And I can't remember the name of this guy, I wish I did, but this African American fellow actually came up to me and he was wearing what looked to be like scrubs almost. And, you know, he was just like, are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need help? And, you know, I was explaining, you know, like I just kicked a tear gas canister and, you know, I can't breathe, I can't see. Like at this point, my eyes are completely shut. I can't even open them without extreme anguish and pain and burning on my eyes. Yeah. And, you know, he ends up, thankfully there were people not too far from us that had, you know, a good amount of supplies. So my boyfriend ran over and got some water and baking soda from them and a rag and came back over, and this gentleman had helped me, you know, lean my head, pour it on there, dab it off just very gently, and just enough so I would be able to open my eyes and still be able to move.
So this man, you say he was in scrubs?
Yes, he was in scrubs, and I ended up asking him, you know, like, are you a nurse? Are you an EMT or whatever else?
Just the guy who's been tear gassed a bunch of times.
Yeah. He ended up saying, I can't remember what he said his job was, but he said he was going to school for being a nurse. So he said he knew just like the basic protocols in that sense of what to do to help somebody, hence why he was able to help relieve my pain so very quickly. And at this point, while I'm being helped, we're, you know, a good amount away from the police, but they're still shooting off other tear gas canisters and still trying to pepper spray anybody. And so once, you know, the pain got relieved for myself, I was able to stand back up and be able to move. And I remember we were getting close to where the Stop and Go shop is, the corner store, right next to, I think it's Gilman and State Street. And as we got there, my boyfriend's pulling me, and he's like, "We have to leave. We have to go home right now." And myself personally, a couple of years back, I used to actually work at Chiba Hut. So
I love Chiba, man. That sandwiches are fucking fire.
Pretty much everything there is fire. So my first instinct, because our car was still so much further up on State Street, and I told my boyfriend, I can't run that whole way. My lungs and my, throat and everything is still just in pain. I can't make it that whole way. So, I told him, let's go down to Chiba Hut. If anything, if they're open, we can hang out in there for a little bit, wait till maybe this dies down, or, whatever else. We walk up to there, and Chiba Hut was actually closed. They were closing down everything in the store because they heard of, how the situation was escalating, and they were closing down the business because they didn't want, anything to happen to the business or the employees that were there. So thankfully from me having been working there, and, some of my old coworkers still working there, I walked up to the side door that they have in the alley that they had open with some people standing outside, and I woke up and I'm just like, "Hey guys, is it okay if I just hang out here for a little bit?" Well, my boyfriend goes to get the car, explained that I had been pepper sprayed multiple times, that I had been tear gassed, they're getting me water, anything else that I could need to help relieve the pain. And we sat there, and I waited for maybe like 10 minutes for my boyfriend to be able to get the car, because he said, he had to drive it around a couple different weird ways to get through crowds of people, or I don't remember if he said he had to go through police at that time. But to get the vehicle close enough that I would be able to not have to go far and then get in. And then we got in the car, went back home. I was just doing anything that I could to help relieve the pain, because at this point my eyes weren't so much as red anymore from the pepper spray, because I had stuff put into them to help it, but the rest of my entire face was just on fire. Almost like if you were to have like a terrible, terrible sunburn and you touch your face constantly. As well as I remember distinctly my right arm around in this area, because I was wearing a short sleeve shirt, unfortunately, was just on fire. I remember in the car driving home, sticking my head out like I was a dog almost, just trying to get air on it because of how hot and how painful it was. So we got home, and at the time I was before any of the tear gas or anything had happened, I was actually live streaming on Facebook, which I do have videos of still. And my parents had seen it, and they were trying to get in contact with me, being like, "What in the hell is going on? Are you okay?" Everything else. My stepfather actually is an old correctional officer for the federal prison that's up in Oxford.
Ooh.
So he's had experience through his training having been pepper sprayed. So, I was talking with him on the phone, and he was giving me, just little tips of what to do to help relieve the pain quicker.
Oh, that's a good...
yeah, which was nice for me to be able to have that, source to help myself out, but also at the same time, and this is just also my stepfather's personality, he was laughing at the fact that I got pepper sprayed and tear gas, because, he may have not agreed so much with my choices, but that's a different story.
Okay.
But, so then being home, we were home for, I'd probably say, a good 2-3 hours then. After, I showered probably 4 different times in freezing cold water, mind you, because you can't shower in hot water, otherwise it's just going to open up your pores more and then let more of the pepper spray and tear gas particles settle into your pores.
And is that something that you learned from your stepfather, or is that just some knowledge that you had already?
That was, I guess I would say, a combination of both, because I do know, how hot water can open up your pores, so I knew that was a thing, but he specifically told me, make sure it's a cold shower, otherwise it's just going to get worse. So, everybody knows freezing cold showers are the most uncomfortable thing that you can have to deal with.
Yeah, I hate them. I haven't taken one in a long time.
Yeah.
Unless, the hot water isn't working. But
yeah, right, and you have no other option.
Yeah.
But, so, we had stayed home for, like I said, a good couple of hours. And I remember, finally getting the pain in my face and my arm from the spray and the tear gas, pretty much any chemical that had touched me. I was able to get it down to a tolerable level. It was still uncomfortable. It was still painful. I was putting ice packs on myself even just to help relieve the hot burning. And, we'd gotten a little bit more food and water into us. And then we saw through, I can't remember if it exactly was pictures and or live streams, but we then saw how the situation was continuing to escalate. And we saw that they had made a barrier of the chain link fences that were down there just for construction down by the Capitol Square. They made a chain link fence put up. The protesters did, not the police. The protesters made a chain link.
Okay, I was going to ask you to, kind of clarify who they were. So you're saying the protesters made...
They found the chain link fence that was either being used for construction or if it was just laying on the side, hadn't been put up because of construction. They put it up with sandbags or whatever else and had it at the very, very top of State Street, right by Ian's Pizza on that corner, like barricaded themselves off from the police so that, there's more of a distance that they could put between themselves or, as I saw them doing it in the past couple nights on live streams, doing it so if they were going to advance, it was going to take them a couple more seconds to get to them so that everybody could, relocate, resituate, and get, everything together. Mm-hmm. So we had seen that, things were continuing to escalate and whatnot, and we both decided, we were like, let's just go back down there and let's just see what's going on this time. I remember it was more or less, I'd have to say, my boyfriend's opinion and him telling me, like, you're going to listen to me this time, if we're down there. If I'm telling you, like, back up from the front lines, don't be right there, do so, because I don't want you to see you in any more pain. Which, I give him props for that, he was just looking out for me. But when we finally got back down there, we had to park our car in the parking ramp that's right on Francis Street. And so we first walked up by where the chain link fences and everything are, because you couldn't, at this point, you couldn't walk on State Street. They had lines of cops blocking off pretty much every street access to State Street at that point. Because, I did forget to mention, after the tear gas, the first couple times they tear gassed us, when we were still down by, like, State Street brats and whatnot, and Urban Outfitters was the first place I remember that got rocks thrown into them. People were either throwing rocks or whatnot. I remember seeing this guy I know, which I won't mention his name,
just
we don't
walking. Want to incriminate nobody.
Yeah.
We don't want the police to show up and kill him.
Yeah, as real as that is. I remember seeing him he didn't obviously take it because he was, trying to get, the products or materials from Urban Outfitters. I guess I would take it as he was trying to make a stance, trying to show. I just remember looking back and seeing him dragging a mannequin that was from inside.
He took the mannequin?
Yeah, and he was just dragging it down State Street. I don't even think he probably took it home or anything, because what's the point? You don't have use for that at home, But then, that's when Urban Outfitters got hit, and then I believe Under Armour got hit not long after, and then more stores just continued to get hit.
It was kind of a domino effect.
Oh, absolutely it was. And, I guess I would say, I don't agree with it because, these are businesses. State Street was like the mark of Madison. It's the most beautiful place. Everybody that comes to visit goes down there to check it out. I remember the first time I moved to Madison, I lived on Langdon Street, a block away, and I just fell in love with State Street because, it's just such, a cool place to be able to be, especially growing up from such a small town coming down to something like this.
Yeah. And I've seen some crazy shit after bar time on State Street, too, so...
We all have. We've all either seen some shit or experienced some.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so then, we were at home. We decided to come back. I remember the first place we went to, like I said, was up by the top of State Street, by like all the chain link fences and whatnot that they had set up there. And, there was a good group of people up there. Like I said, again, less than 50 there, but also people were separated by, either being up at the top, being on one side of the street, being on the other side of the street, just being blocked off by cops the whole way down State Street because there was no access being allowed onto it. And, we were up there for a little bit looking at everything, Yeah, I may have, again, because obviously still upset about what had happened previously, had screamed to some of the cops that you could see, at the police or, why are you doing this to us and whatever else. And then I remember we walked down kind of going back towards where the public library is. And I'm really glad, thankfully, nothing happened at the public library. But I remember seeing as we're walking down there, I must not have noticed it when we were going up there originally. As we got down, there was a police car that was parked directly on the side of the public library. and they had broken all the windows. Somebody is spray painted on the side, fuck 12.
Of the police car?
Yes, of a police car.
Oh, boy.
And I remember there were, because there's the corner, where the library is, and then it connects onto State Street right there. I can't remember what street that is exactly. Right by like the Overture Center and everything.
Yeah, for sure. And you said the library was untouched.
Yes, the library was untouched.
So looters were not interested in stealing books.
Yeah, no, they were not at the time. But I remember there was a line of police that were down there, and there was, a very small number of people. And as we were walking back, they must have pepper sprayed or tear gassed them because everybody came running back towards like where the intersection was. And I remember seeing one of my friends, like I didn't even know it was this person at the time. Like I ran up to her and I was just like, do you need help? Do you need help? Grabbing a water bottle and saying, because we at the time had came with a couple water bottles with baking soda already in them, prepared to help if it came down to it. And, I could just come up to this girl and I'm like, here, just close your eyes, let me help. And then, once I ended up realizing who it was, I was just like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Hey, it's me, just so it's, I guess I would say, a little bit more reassuring to know that somebody that is helping you rather than entirely just a random person.
And everything that you're recounting happened on that Saturday?
Yes, this is still all on Saturday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, this is even, at this point, I would say maybe like 8 o'clock at the very most.
Okay, for sure. Okay, cool.
And then, so I remember helping her. We were all standing on the corner there, and I remember seeing from up the hill, the opposite direction of where the cops were, a very small number of cops, like maybe 4 or 5 of them, walking down, and then they surrounded themselves around the police car because obviously they must have gotten word of the damage that was done to it. And then we ended up seeing a tow truck come in down the road and start to get the car to tow it away because of all the damage that had been done.
The police car?
Yes, the police car. And then the vehicle had been taken away. Then I remember, I can't remember exactly, because it's hard to recall to an extent, because as much as I hate to say it, it was a very traumatic experience having been there through everything, because it's nothing I would have had expected to ever have to go through living here in Madison, because normally it's such an open and loving community. But then I remember at some point or another, I ended up down on the corner of State, Henry, and West Johnson. So right by that Noodles and Company right there on the corner. Mm-hmm. And we're standing there, there's a line of cops, traffic is still, trickling through here and there when people aren't standing in the road. And my boyfriend, said he wanted to go back to the car because I think he left his cigarettes there. So he wanted to go get them. And, it's still a hike to get back there, especially because you can't take the main path that you normally would down State Street or down these normal streets because most of them are blocked off. So I told him, I was like, okay, I'm going to be right here. My phone's still on. I had a little fanny pack with it on. And he left. He was gone for, I can't remember exactly how long. It was probably a good amount of time. But in that time, there were times when our little group that was over there by the corner of Noodles and Company, a couple of us, would get up closer to the cops and be yelling at them, asking, like, why are you doing this? Why aren't you, helping people and whatever else? And then that's when the time came that I was actually hit by a vehicle myself.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this right here, okay, so we previously had, before you came in, we had spoke about you being hit by a vehicle. So this right here is, I want you to walk us through this, because this right here, I haven't heard the whole story yet, but it sounds ridiculous. So can you let us know what happened?
Absolutely. So what was happening is, I remember it was me, like one other girl, and maybe 1 or 2 other people. The group was mostly standing off of West Johnson where the traffic is going, heading towards the east side. Once in a while there would be 1 or 2 of us that would be standing in the road, yelling at cops or, standing in the way of traffic. And also at the time you have to understand, we're not looking up at the street lights to know whether or not it's red or green, to know whether or not they should be going through. Some cars are coming through honking in support. A couple of them drove through playing NWA's song, Fuck the Police, which I give him props to. We were playing that song on the way down too.
Great song with a message too.
Absolutely, a very powerful message.
The crazy part is that song came out in the 80s?
Yeah.
80s, and still
even
true
before I was born.
Yeah, and it's still true to this day.
Absolutely.
It's relevant. just not to sidetrack it. We'll get right back to it. But speaking of Ice Cube, he has been taking a stand lately. He was supposed to be going on Good Morning America, and he canceled due to the things going on. He was just like, I don't feel like telling America good morning. So
Yeah.
Cube still holds his stance as far as that record being made. So
and that's a very good thing to hear, that even though that was a stance that he felt 20 plus years ago, that he still feels passionately about and is willing to take the hit of not making whatever money he would have by going on Good Morning America.
And Good Morning America is huge too.
Yeah.
It's not some
Yeah. So yeah, I absolutely give him props to that, and any other person part of the NWA group who is still alive and passionate about the song or just the matters at hand.
Rest in peace, Eazy-E.
Absolutely.
Okay, so continue with your story.
There were cars trickling through here and there, and I remember at one point, and I distinctively remember this, there was a very big white Chevy pickup truck that was pulling up, and I was in the left lane of traffic, I specifically remember, and I was standing there, and this truck pulled up and stopped. Just like you would expect any other car to do when there's a person standing in front of you. And, a couple people, I barely knew anybody that was there with me in this group at the time. I saw people that I knew here and there throughout the evening that I would say something to if I recognized them at the time. But, a couple people told me, hey, just get out of the way, let them go. They're just trying to get home, you don't know what's going on. And I remember letting this big white Chevy go past by, and then another vehicle, and I ended up seeing I can't remember the exact kind of car because I obviously didn't have enough time to really look at it. It was like a darker colored SUV, almost kind of a grayish, a dark gray kind of silver color. I remember it coming up a couple cars after the big white truck. And I remember looking up and seeing that they had a bike on the top of the hood, and then also seeing that, and that they did this purposely, visibly having a Trump 2020 blue yard sign that you would have stuck on the top of their car, trying to show whatever support or, put out whatever, message that they were trying to do. So when I saw that vehicle begin to get closer, I then moved more directly into the middle of the lane, stopping so that, to not allow this car to go through. What I was trying to do was to show a message, to show there might be people out there, but there are also people out there like myself who don't agree with the president and his choices and his stances or the message that he seems to portray in this world that we live in now.
Yes, and I would just like to say, regardless of beliefs, it is never okay to bring it to a violent. Whether it be one side or the other, I'm saying, nobody should do it. It should never come to.
Yeah, you can argue with somebody about their views, their beliefs, and then you can say whatever you want to them.
Yeah, call them a bitch or whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
don't put your hands on them.
Yeah, don't put your hands, don't cause harm to somebody else just because of what they think or what they believe. And myself, clearly, just by standing in the road, I wasn't trying to cause harm to this vehicle. Now, when I'd explained this whole situation to, say, my mom and my stepfather, who unfortunately I know did vote for Trump when he was first elected. My stepfather personally no longer agrees with him because he ended up having to be furloughed for multiple months when he was still working at the prison and didn't get paid, but still had to go in and work because otherwise he'd lose his job and lose his pension, and he'd been there for 20 plus years. So, even though we had different opinions and everything else, my mom, had made comments like, how do you not know this person in the car wasn't scared? And I know for a fact that I was the only person in the road. There was nobody that was coming close to the car. We were not surrounding the vehicle. There was, no hitting on the vehicle. We weren't shaking the vehicle. Nothing to cause somebody that much fear to do what they ended up doing. Because what ended up happening is I saw, and what happened is the vehicle, it slowed down, almost came to a stop. And this is when I'm probably, 10, 15 feet away from the car. And then it's, went forward a little bit more, stopped again. And I'm still standing, directly in the middle of the lane of traffic. And the vehicle then, after stopping the last time, then just speeds up with no with no concern of trying to move one way or another way to avoid me at all, just plowing at me. And I remember backing up, a couple steps as the vehicle is coming up directly next to my body, being like, whoa, holy shit, this is actually fucking happening. And then them just more or less flooring it. And I remember when that happened, the vehicle, it ended up pushing me. I remember falling onto the right side of my body. And thankfully, I had my backpack with a couple water bottles in it because I fell onto my right side, then back onto my back. So thankfully, I didn't get too much pain with my back.
So the water bottles kind of cushions your
A little bit, yeah.
Wow, look at that.
Right? Water saving life even more than we know.
Water is good stuff. Drink it. I know some people who don't drink water. If you out there and you don't drink water, you're crazy. Drink you a fucking bottle of water.
For real though. Pretty much all I drink is either water or wine, so.
All right. You got a little bit of both in here.
Yep.
Right, so, continue.
So then I remember like I said, hitting my right side, falling onto the ground, and then rolling over onto my back and onto my left side, which thankfully I did, because otherwise if I hadn't, that vehicle would have ran over me entirely. The vehicle itself would have went on top of me rather than just having hit me and pushed me onto the ground, which regardless, any of that is still not okay. So then when that happened, mind you, to give you a perspective of this, the police are less than 10 feet away from me. They're less than 10 feet away from me when they saw a vehicle hit an innocent bystander who was not throwing water bottles, was not throwing rocks, was not causing any violence, was simply just standing in a road. And as I said earlier, I didn't look up at the street to see if it was red or green. I didn't know. So regardless, it still is not okay. The police didn't come over after I was hit and laying on the ground to check to see if I was okay, to make sure that I was all right. And none of them looked or did anything to, call in, hey, this vehicle just hit a person, have a squad car go try to find it.
So are you saying kind of like the police kind of low-key supported what had happened to you as far as...
I would say either that, they either, like what you're saying, either low-key supported it or... I guess what you would say, turn their cold shoulder to it.
Yeah, turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah, there you go. That's the words I was looking for.
So they basically was just like, oh well, that's what she gets.
More or less, yeah. That's how I took the situation. Like I said, thankfully myself, I rolled out of the way. I didn't have any broken bones or anything. I still you can see the bruise still here on my wrist. I don't know if it shows up in the camera.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah, my wrist is still pretty sore. My arm, I can only get so much movement out of this, and this is 3-4 days after the incident has happened. My legs still hurt from falling on them. Yes, that day I looked at my phone, how the pedometer has on it once we finally got home. And yes, I'd walked in total 7 miles that day. But for the past month and a half, I've been walking at minimum 3 miles every day. So I know my legs were sore from walking, but not as sore as they should be. They were more sore than normal because of the incidents that happened. Mm-hmm. And so I remember the car that ended up speeding on by. I ended up getting up after, the protesters ran to my side after this happened and came up to me and were asking me, men and women, are you okay? Do you need help? Do you need me to call an ambulance? Well, the police officers just stood there in a line watching. And, I told them, no, I'm okay. I don't think anything's broken. I don't think anything's fractured. Not that I can tell, but I've also never broken a bone, so I don't really know exactly.
Yeah.
And then I remember the vehicle just kept going by. Later on, I ended up talking to some other man that I was there, and he ended up telling me that once the vehicle hit me, it continued to just speed off as fast as it could because obviously the person in the vehicle knew that they were doing wrong. And they said that the bike that was on top of the vehicle actually ended up falling off of the roof and onto the ground. And some protesters went over there and were stomping on the bike and in retaliation for the situation which happened. Which, after they told me that, I was like, thank you, I appreciate the support, Okay. And then after, hearing those things and everything else, the cops actually advanced from the side by the Triangle Market right there, from the side of West Johnson and over to the other side, where, by more of the Noodles and Company side. So we actually didn't have any more access onto West Johnson. They had it blocked off this way and this way. So there were people over here and people over here. And I remember being on the left or the right side, if you're standing outside of Noodles and Company, and facing away from it, that right side of the building. I remember standing there in front of some of these cops and, asking them, like, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you come and check on me to see if I was okay? You're here to protect and serve. You didn't protect me. You didn't even check to see if I'm okay. And that's part of your job, is to, assist, a need to somebody if they need it.
Absolutely.
Because they have, all that EMT medical training, whatever it is exactly. I don't know the terminology for it. But when I asked one of these officers, why didn't you do anything? And I was like, why didn't you go after the car that hit me? I remember distinctively with this officer saying, we'll look into it. And obviously, in my personal opinion, I knew that wasn't going to happen. And it didn't. I came to find out that it didn't, because I, on Monday, actually called the Madison Police Department myself and, asked about the situation, told everything that happened, and they had no record or report of anything that had gone on. So I ended up filling out a report and have a case number and everything, with an officer looking into the information and hopefully being able to find the person who did it.
Yeah, hopefully something comes out of that. So we were getting close to our time limit here. So is this all coming like?
This is coming towards the end of the evening when I was there. Then I remember getting a phone call from my sister not long after being hit from the car. And there's, so many people around me, a lot of talking, a lot of yelling. And I remember answering the phone and telling her, I can't talk, I can't hear you. I was just hit by a car. I'll talk to you later. And when I was talking to the police officers, explaining and giving them every detail that I could about the situation for the case, I remember looking through my recent calls and seeing that was at about 10:30. Then when we were standing on the right side of Noodles and Company, I remember they ended up coming over the megaphone bullhorn, or whatever the cops were using, and announcing that we have been authorized to use chemical ammunition upon you. Disperse or we will use.
Wow.
And I don't know what chemical ammunition is.
It doesn't sound very pleasant.
No, and it wasn't. Thankfully, I talked to my stepdad because he's been trained in these things, having worked for the correctional, institutions. He said, it could have been a number of things that they could have used, because when they're authorized to do those things, they have pretty much free will at that point.
And that's some scary stuff.
And it really is. I'm glad that my boyfriend had pulled me from more or less the bigger group on the right side back onto the State Street side. But I do have videos of the people being sprayed with not like their normal pepper spray canisters, but being sprayed with almost like a giant Nerf gun looking type thing. And it was like a green chemical that just sprayed out onto everybody.
Well, we would love to see those videos.
Oh, absolutely. Like I told you, through our messages previously, any of the videos or, footage that I have, I'm willing to, give to you to help,
Absolutely.
let people see more of the in-person experience rather than just hearing it from somebody.
Okay.
Then, there was on the State Street side, me and my boyfriend, maybe 1, 2, 3 other people that were over there. And, we're going up to the cops and they're telling us, go home. And we're like, okay, we're trying to go home. Our vehicle is this way. Please just let us through and we will go home. That's what we're trying to do. And they're like, no, we're not letting you through. We're like, okay, well then escort us over there. There's 10 of you, escort the 2 people or 3 people over to that side of the street and we'll be gone. We'll be out of your way. And, they just kept saying, nope. And I remember, and at this point, my boyfriend, the chemical ammunition and stuff was happening, he finally came back after I was hit by the vehicle. He was just on State Street picking up glass. He wasn't doing anything. He was just trying to help, keep Madison of the pretty city it is. And he saw myself and this other male, talking to these cops, and he just came up and tried to grab me and this other random man who we have no idea who it was, and just trying to pull us away from the cops and just saying, let's go, let's just walk around the block, whatever else. And one of the, I believe, at this time they had the riot shields, and the riot shield said State Patrol on it, and they ended up pepper spraying him, even though he was walking up, grabbing people and trying to get them away from the situation, trying to get them away from the police, and they still pepper sprayed him for no reason. He was not, being threatening, was not causing any harm, just simply was trying to help de-escalate the situation.
Okay.
And then at that point we ended up having to walk like a good 6-7 blocks around just to be able to get back to our car. And at this point, my body is hurting, my body's aching. I still had the adrenaline running through my body, but we got home probably, I'd say, around like 12 midnight or so.
And then you guys stayed in the house. This is where the night came to
Yeah,
an end.
then we stayed in the house. We ended up watching live streams and whatnot of everything that continued on for the rest of the night for probably another 2-3 hours or so.
Okay, so now I want to so we're so we've come to the end of your story, and man, this is crazy. You might have to do this in 2 parts.
Yeah.
But okay, so your overall your overview of the day, as far as the police, as far as the protesters, as far as the looting, what do you think? We already discussed like the police being aggressors, like, but what do you overall? What do you think? What did you get from the experience? Like, did it change your opinion of the police at all? I mean, it seems like it didn't, you know. Because
I mean, I would have to say, like, I've obviously in the past I've had my few run-ins with the police, whether or not, you know, I was doing something wrong or I wasn't. You know, I've had my experience with them, and especially having, you know, had been my stepfather worked for the federal, you know, prison system, you know, and technically being a form of law enforcement, I try to have respect because I don't want to escalate situations. In the beginning of the day, obviously everything that happened did change my opinion of the Madison police very abruptly, because I never thought that I myself personally would ever have to experience being pepper sprayed, tear gassed, shoved by them with their riot shields, batons, or being hit by them in front of a car and having no assistance. It blew my mind.
It was a wake-up call.
But one thing, after me and my boyfriend got home that evening, me and him were, you know, talking as we're watching live streams and everything else. We ended up having to say, as the night went on and we were back down there later on, we did have to say, as much as the Madison Police Department may have made bad choices earlier on in the day, later on in the evening as the situation was escalating everywhere throughout the downtown area, the Madison Police Department seemed to have more of a restraint and not, you know, doing so much as, you know, ridiculous actions like the state patrol pepper spraying my boyfriend for no reason. Yeah. The Madison Police Department was simply standing there and just holding their ground, in comparison to all of the different counties of police departments. Like, I heard Sauk County was there, DeForest was there, Columbia County was there, State Patrol was there. I have to say, were being more aggressive and using a more excessive force on people when it was unnecessary.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're coming to an end to the show. What do you anything else you want to say? You want to shout out or anything like that?
Well, if anything, all I have to say is, you know, thanks to my boyfriend for trying to keep me as safe as he did. I know he had to deal with my temper and I wasn't listening at certain points in the day, but I was thankful he was able to, you know, pull me out of the line of fire of chemical ammunition. Thank you to everybody I have seen or that has contacted me through Facebook after hearing just my story that I've been able to post online and giving me support for my actions. Obviously, I want everybody to know I wasn't down there to get the attention or for the clout, as one would say. I was down. Yeah, I was down there because I was standing up for what I believed in. And if anything, another props that I want to throw out too is the actual peaceful protesters, the ones who have, even after Saturday, still continued to try to keep up the same, you know, the same mindset and the same peaceful aspect that originally started on Saturday morning. And all that I can hope is that some form of reform or change actually comes to the policing system and the judicial system here, especially in Madison, Wisconsin, so that nobody else ever has to go through an experience like this.
Okay. Well, there you have it, people. We want to thank you for coming and telling your side of the story. Hopefully this will encourage other people to step up and speak about what they went through. You know, I'm sorry that you did go through that, but we appreciate having you. This has been A Time to Chill. Thank you to our special guest,
Monique Rios, and thank you for having me here.
All right. You people stay safe out there. No justice, no peace, and all that stuff, and we will see y'all later.
All right.
Bye.